Ayana had always felt drawn to the old stone bridge that crossed the rushing waters near her reservation. The 23-year-old woman would often sit on its weathered stones during her lunch breaks from the tribal council office, watching the water flow beneath while planning her future. Unlike many of her friends who had left for the cities, Ayana dreamed of building something lasting right here on the land her ancestors had walked for generations. The idea came to her on a particularly warm spring morning as she stood at the bridge's center, feeling the cool mist from the water below. She wanted to build a house. Not just any house, but one that honored both her heritage and her vision for the future. The perfect spot revealed itself as she walked downstream that day. A gentle slope overlooking the water, sheltered by ancient oak trees and close enough to the bridge that she could hear the soothing sound of flowing water from her future front porch. When Ayana shared her plans with her grandmother, the elderly woman's eyes clouded with something that looked like worry. "That land has old stories, child," her grandmother said quietly, stirring her tea with unusual slowness. "Some places hold memories that run deeper than the river itself." But Ayana was determined. She had saved money for 3 years, working extra shifts and living modestly. This was her chance to create something beautiful and meaningful. The tribal council meeting about her building proposal was tenser than she had expected. Several elders exchanged meaningful glances when she pointed to her chosen location on the community map. Elder Robert Crowfeather, a man known for his extensive knowledge of local history, asked her if she had researched the area's past. Ayana admitted she had not, focusing instead on practical matters like soil quality and water access. The approval came through, but with an unusual condition. She must consult with the tribal historian before beginning any excavation work. Dr. Sarah White Eagle, the tribal historian, was a woman in her 50s who had spent decades documenting their people's stories. When Ayana visited her small office filled with maps, photographs, and carefully preserved documents, Dr. White Eagle pulled out a hand-drawn map that looked decades old. Her finger traced the area around the bridge, lingering on the exact spot where Ayana planned to build. "This area was significant to our people long before the bridge was built," she explained. "There are stories of ceremonies, of important gatherings, but also of things that were deliberately forgotten." The historian's words stayed with Ayana as she began preparing for construction. She hired a local contractor, James River Hawk, whose family had been builders for generations. James was enthusiastic about the project, especially Ayana's plans to incorporate traditional design elements with modern sustainability features. They spent hours discussing how to blend solar panels with traditional materials, how to position the house to honor the 4 directions, and how to ensure the building would complement rather than dominate the natural landscape. As summer approached, Ayana found herself spending more time at the building site. She would arrive early in the morning with her coffee and notebook, sketching ideas and imagining her daily life in the future house. The location felt perfect, close enough to town for her work at the tribal council, but secluded enough for peace and reflection. She could picture herself hosting family gatherings in the spacious kitchen she had planned, watching sunsets from the wraparound porch, and tending a garden that would provide both food and traditional medicines. The excavation was scheduled to begin in June. Ayana took vacation time from work to oversee the process personally. She felt it was important to be present when the ground was first broken, to offer prayers and ensure that any cultural protocols were properly observed. Her grandmother had taught her the importance of asking permission from the land before making changes to it, and Ayana had spent the previous evening in quiet ceremony, burning sage and offering tobacco to the spirits of the place. On the morning excavation was set to begin, Ayana arrived at the site before dawn. The construction crew would not arrive for another 2 hours, giving her time for private reflection. As she stood near the bridge in the growing light, she noticed something she had never seen before: marks carved into one of the bridge's stone pillars. The symbols were weathered and partially covered by decades of moss growth, but they were definitely human-made. They looked like the traditional pictographs she had studied in college, but she could not immediately interpret their meaning. The discovery of the markings filled Ayana with both excitement and unease. She photographed them from multiple angles, planning to show them to Dr. White Eagle later that day. As she examined the carvings more closely, she realized they seemed to point toward the exact location where her house would be built. The coincidence felt too significant to ignore. and she found herself wondering if her choice of building site had been guided by something deeper than practical considerations. When James and his crew arrived, Ayanna showed them the carvings. The older workers nodded solemnly, recognizing their significance even if they could not read them. One of the crew members, an elderly man named Tom Standing Bear, asked if proper ceremonies had been performed. When Ayanna confirmed that they had been, he seemed relieved. "Good," he said simply. "This land has been waiting a long time for someone to treat it with proper respect." The excavation began slowly and carefully. James had instructed his crew to watch for anything unusual, artifacts, unusual soil changes, or structural elements that might indicate previous human activity on the site. Ayanna stood nearby, feeling a mixture of anticipation and nervousness as the first shovelful of earth was moved. This was the moment her dream began becoming reality, but she could not shake the feeling that they were about to uncover more than just the space for her foundation. As the morning progressed and the hole for the foundation grew deeper, Ayanna found herself thinking about her grandmother's words and the historian's careful questions. The land did seem to hold memories, and she was beginning to suspect that building her house here might reveal secrets that had been buried for many years. The thought both thrilled and worried her, but there was no turning back now. Her house would be built, and whatever lay beneath this ground would soon see daylight once again. The metallic sound of the shovel hitting something solid stopped all work at the construction site. James Riverhawk raised his hand, signaling his crew to halt their digging. Ayanna's heart raced as she approached the edge of the foundation hole where Tom Standing Bear was carefully brushing dirt away from whatever lay beneath. The object was clearly not a rock. It had straight edges and appeared to be made of worked stone. "We need to stop here," James said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "This could be something important to your people." Ayanna nodded, grateful for his respectful approach. She had heard too many stories of construction crews destroying artifacts in their rush to complete projects. She immediately called Dr. White Eagle, explaining what they had found and requesting her immediate presence at the site. While they waited for the historian to arrive, Ayanna found herself studying the partially exposed object with growing fascination. It appeared to be a carved stone slab, much larger than the small artifacts typically found in the area. Tom Standing Bear, who had worked construction on the reservation for over 30 years, had never seen anything quite like it. "In all my years digging foundations," he told Ayanna, "I found arrowheads, pottery pieces, even old tools. But nothing this big, nothing this deliberately placed." Dr. White Eagle arrived within an hour, accompanied by Dr. Michael Frost, an archaeologist from the State University who often collaborated with the tribe on historical discoveries. Both experts examined the partially exposed stone with intense interest, taking measurements and photographs before allowing any further excavation. Dr. White Eagle's expression grew more serious as she studied the visible portion of the carving, and Ayanna noticed her having a whispered conversation with Dr. Frost that seemed urgent. The careful process of exposing the stone slab took the rest of that day and most of the next. Working with brushes, small tools, and infinite patience, the archaeologist revealed what appeared to be a ceremonial marker of significant size and complexity. The stone was approximately 6 feet long and 4 feet wide, covered with intricate carvings that told a story neither expert could immediately interpret. The symbols were similar to those Ayanna had found on the bridge, but far more elaborate and detailed. As more of the stone was revealed, it became clear that this was not just a single artifact but part of a larger structure. The edges of the stone fit perfectly into grooves carved into the bedrock beneath, suggesting it had been designed as a covering or lid for something. Below, Dr. Frost's excitement was barely contained as he explained to Ayanna that they might have discovered an intact burial chamber or ceremonial cache, something that could provide invaluable insights into her people's ancient practices. The news of the discovery spread quickly through the reservation community. By the third day, a small crowd of tribal members had gathered to observe the excavation process. Elder Robert Crowfeather arrived with several other tribal council members, their faces grave as they discussed the implications of the find. Ayanna overheard fragments of their conversations, words like sacred site and ancient protocols and consultation with the spirits. That made her realize her house project had become something much more significant. The tribal council called an emergency meeting to discuss the discovery. Ayanna attended, feeling like her personal dream had somehow become a community responsibility. The discussion was conducted partly in English and partly in their native language, which Ayanna understood well enough to follow the debate. Some council members argued that the site should be left undisturbed, that the ancestors had buried this stone for good reasons. Others felt that understanding their history was important for the younger generation, and that the discovery could be a blessing rather than a problem. During the meeting, Ayanna's grandmother rose to speak. The elderly woman's voice was strong despite her age, and she commanded immediate respect from everyone present. She spoke in their native language, her words flowing with the rhythm of traditional storytelling. Though she spoke for several minutes, Ayanna caught only some of the words, references to old stories, to responsibilities of the living toward the ancestors, and to the importance of acting with wisdom rather than haste. When the grandmother finished speaking, Elder Crow Feather translated her words into English for the benefit of the younger tribal members and the visiting archaeologists. She had reminded everyone that their people had always believed the land chose who would care for it, and perhaps Ayanna's desire to build on this particular spot was not coincidence, but guidance. However, she also emphasized that any decision about the buried stone must be made with proper ceremony and consultation with traditional spiritual leaders. The decision was made to postpone any further excavation until a proper ceremony could be held and spiritual guidance sought. Ayanna felt disappointed about the delay in her house construction, but she also understood the significance of what had been found. Dr. White Eagle approached her after the meeting, explaining that the discovery could be one of the most important archaeological finds in the region in decades, but that it must be handled according to tribal traditions and federal laws protecting Native American cultural sites. That evening, Ayanna sat alone by the bridge, looking out over the partially excavated site where her house was supposed to be built. The tarp-covered stone monument seemed to pulse with significance in the fading light. She found herself wondering what her ancestors had buried beneath that carefully carved stone, and why they had chosen this particular location. The spot she had selected for its beauty and tranquility was revealing itself to be far more complex than she had imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her friend Maria, who lived in the city and worked as a software engineer. "How's the house construction going?" The message read. Ayanna found herself unsure how to respond. How could she explain that her simple dream of building a home had uncovered what might be a sacred burial ground? How could she convey the mixture of excitement and responsibility she now felt? As night fell, Ayanna made a decision. She would not see this discovery as an obstacle to her dreams, but as an opportunity to deepen her connection to her heritage. If her ancestors had chosen this place for something important centuries ago, perhaps they were also guiding her to be here now, to help uncover and protect their legacy. The house would still be built. She was determined about that, but it would now be built with full knowledge and respect for the sacred ground beneath it. Walking back to her car, Ayanna noticed movement near the covered stone. In the moonlight, she could make out the silhouette of an elderly person standing motionless beside the excavation site. For a moment her heart raced, thinking someone might be tampering with the archaeological find. But as she got closer, she recognized the figure as her grandmother, who stood with her hands raised in what appeared to be a prayer posture. Ayanna approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt what was clearly a private spiritual moment. Her grandmother acknowledged her presence with a slight nod but continued her quiet prayers for several more minutes. When she finally lowered her hands, she turned to Ayanna with an expression of deep peace.
"The ancestors are not angry about the digging," she said softly.
"But they want us to remember why they put this stone here in the first place. Tomorrow, we begin learning what they wanted us to know." The ceremony to properly approach the buried stone was scheduled for dawn, as was traditional for important spiritual undertakings. Ayanna arrived at the site while stars were still visible, carrying the sage, sweetgrass, cedar, and tobacco her grandmother had prepared for the occasion. The holy man who would lead the ceremony, Joseph Fire Walker, was already present, along with several tribal elders and Dr. White Eagle, who had been invited to observe and document the proceedings. As the sun rose over the water, casting long shadows across the excavation site, Joseph Firewalker began the prayers that would ask permission from the ancestors to continue uncovering what they had buried. The ceremony was conducted entirely in their native language, with smoke from the sacred plants carrying their words to the spirit world. Ayanna felt a profound sense of connection to her heritage as she participated in the ritual, realizing that this was probably the first time such ceremonies had been held at this location in many generations. After the ceremony concluded, Dr. Frost and his team were given permission to carefully remove the carved stone slab. The process took most of the morning, requiring special equipment to lift the heavy stone without damaging it. As it was raised from its resting place, everyone present gathered around to see what lay beneath. What they discovered took everyone's breath away, a perfectly preserved chamber containing artifacts that appeared to have been untouched for centuries. The Ibamoy underground chamber was roughly 8 feet square and lined with fitted stones that had been carefully sealed to prevent water damage. Inside, arranged with obvious care and intention, were dozens of objects that represented a complete picture of their ancestors' daily and spiritual life. There were pottery vessels of various sizes, many still containing what appeared to be seeds or dried plant materials. Carefully wrapped bundles revealed tools made from stone, bone, and wood, all in remarkable condition due to the chamber's protection from the elements. Dr. White Eagle's excitement was evident as she began the preliminary cataloging process. Among the artifacts were several items she had never seen before, including a series of carved bone tablets covered with symbols that appeared to tell a story. There were also what appeared to be maps carved into thin sheets of copper, showing the local river system and marking specific locations with symbols that might indicate important sites or resources. The discovery was already being hailed as one of the most significant archaeological finds in the region, but it was Ayanna who noticed the most intriguing detail. At the bottom of the chamber, beneath all the other artifacts, lay a collection of stones that had been shaped and marked with symbols. When she pointed them out to Dr. White Eagle, the historian's expression changed from excitement to amazement. The stones appeared to be foundation markers, similar to those used in modern construction to mark the corners and boundaries of important buildings. The implications were staggering. Their ancestors had not just used this site for ceremony, but had planned to build something permanent here. The discovery of the foundation markers sparked intense debate among the tribal council members and archaeologists. If the site had been intended for construction by their ancestors, what did that mean for Ayanna's plans to build her house there? Some argued that it proved the location was appropriate for building, that she was simply continuing a plan that had been interrupted by historical events. Others felt that the sacred nature of the buried chamber made any modern construction inappropriate. Elder Crow Feather spent hours studying the carved bone tablets with Dr. White Eagle, occasionally calling in other tribal members who had knowledge of traditional symbol systems. Gradually, a picture began to emerge of what the chamber represented. It appeared to be a time capsule of sorts, carefully prepared by their ancestors to preserve important knowledge for future generations. The seeds in the pottery vessels were from plants that had been important for food and medicine. The tools represented essential skills for survival and craftsmanship. The copper maps were perhaps the most valuable discovery from a historical perspective. They showed not only the local river system, but also marked the locations of seasonal camps, important resource gathering sites, and what appeared to be trade routes connecting their people with other tribes. Dr. Frost explained to Ayanna that such detailed geographical knowledge, preserved in permanent form, was extremely rare among Native American archaeological finds. The maps could revolutionize understanding of how her people had lived and traveled in the centuries before European contact. As news of the discovery spread beyond the reservation, requests began coming in from museums and universities across the country. Everyone wanted access to the artifacts, to study them and potentially display them in their collections. Ayanna found herself in the unexpected position of having significant input into these decisions. Since the chamber had been found on land she had purchased for her house, the responsibility felt enormous, and she spent many sleepless nights, considering how to balance her own dreams with her obligation to her heritage. The most mysterious aspect of the discovery was the deliberate nature of how everything had been buried. This was not a hasty burial to protect valuable items from enemies, but a carefully planned preservation effort. Someone had taken great care to ensure that these artifacts would survive for many generations, waiting for the right time and the right person to uncover them. The more Ayana learned about the chamber, the more she wondered if her grandmother's words about the land choosing its caretaker might have deeper meaning than she had initially understood. 3 weeks after the chamber's discovery, a breakthrough came in interpreting the carved bone tablets. A visiting scholar who specialized in pre-Columbian indigenous writing systems was able to identify a pattern in the symbols. The tablets appeared to contain instructions, not just for creating the tools and pottery found in the chamber, but for something much more significant. They seemed to be architectural plans, detailed instructions for constructing a building that would serve both practical and ceremonial purposes. The revelation that the chamber contained architectural plans changed everything. Dr. White Eagle worked with traditional craftspeople to create detailed drawings based on the bone tablet instructions, revealing plans for a structure that was both elegant and innovative. The building design incorporated advanced understanding of seasonal changes, water management, and sustainable construction techniques that were remarkably sophisticated for their time. It was clear that whoever had created these plans had been a master architect and engineer. Ayana studied the reconstructed building plans with growing amazement. The structure described in the bone tablets was not just a house, but a community center designed to serve multiple functions. It included spaces for food preparation and storage, areas for crafts and tool-making, rooms for teaching and ceremony, and living spaces for multiple families. The design was remarkably similar to her own vision for a house that would serve as a gathering place for family and friends, a center for cultural preservation and community building. The most striking aspect of the ancient plans was how perfectly they suited the location Ayana had chosen for her house. The building was designed to take advantage of the morning sun for warmth, the afternoon shade provided by the oak trees, and the proximity to the water for practical needs and spiritual significance. It was as if her ancestors had surveyed the site with the same priorities she had used in selecting it: beauty, functionality, and harmony with the natural environment. As autumn approached, Ayana faced a decision that would affect not only her own future, but potentially the cultural heritage of her entire tribe. She could abandon her building plans and allow the site to be preserved as an archaeological monument. She could build her modern house according to her original plans, incorporating appropriate respect for the buried chamber. Or she could consider a third option that was beginning to form in her mind, something that would honor both her ancestors' vision and her own dreams for the future. Ayana's bold proposal to the tribal council took everyone by surprise. Instead of building her modern house or abandoning the site entirely, she suggested constructing the building described in the ancient bone tablets. Using traditional materials and methods wherever possible, combined with modern safety standards and sustainable technology, she wanted to complete what her ancestors had started centuries ago. The audacious plan would create a living monument to their heritage, while fulfilling her dream of building something meaningful on the land. The council chamber fell silent as Ayana finished presenting her idea. She had spent weeks developing the proposal with help from Dr. White Eagle, James Riverhawk, and several traditional craftspeople. The presentation included detailed drawings showing how the ancient plans could be adapted for modern use while maintaining their essential character. Solar panels would be integrated invisibly into the roof design. Modern plumbing and electrical systems would be concealed within walls constructed using traditional stone and timber techniques. Elder Crowfeather was the first to speak after Ayana's presentation. His words were measured and thoughtful as he acknowledged the ambition and respect evident in her proposal. However, he also raised practical concerns about the complexity and cost of such a project. Building according to ancient specifications would require specialized knowledge and skills that few people still possessed. The project would also need approval from multiple government agencies that regulated both archaeological sites and new construction. Dr. White Eagle stood to address these concerns, explaining that she had already begun researching the feasibility of the project. Several universities had expressed interest in supporting the construction as a living archaeology project. Students and faculty from programs in architecture, engineering, anthropology, and Native American studies could participate in the building process while documenting traditional construction techniques. The project could serve as both a residence for Ayana and a teaching laboratory for preserving ancient knowledge. The financial challenges were significant but not insurmountable. Dr. White Eagle had identified several grant opportunities specifically designed to support projects that combined cultural preservation with practical outcomes. The National Science Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and several private foundations that focused on Indigenous heritage had all expressed preliminary interest. Additional funding could come from partnering with the university programs and potentially from sustainable building demonstration grants. James River Hawk addressed the construction challenges, explaining that he had already consulted with traditional builders from several tribes who still practiced ancient techniques. While the skills were rare, they were not lost entirely. His own grandfather had been taught stone fitting and timber joining methods that were nearly identical to those described in the bone tablets. The project would require more time and patience than modern construction, but it was definitely possible with the right team and proper planning. Ayana's grandmother rose to speak, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the council chamber. She spoke in their native language, her words carrying the authority of age and wisdom. When she finished, Elder Crowfeather translated her message. The ancestors had preserved their building plans for a reason, and perhaps that reason was now becoming clear. If the land had chosen Ayana to uncover this knowledge, then perhaps it had also chosen her to use it. The vote to support Ayana's proposal was not unanimous, but it passed with a clear majority. Several council members expressed reservations about the complexity and expense of the project, while others worried about the potential for failure or cultural appropriation by outside academics. However, most agreed that the opportunity to create a living demonstration of their ancestors' architectural knowledge was too valuable to pass up. With official tribal support secured, Ayana faced the daunting task of actually organizing and managing the project. Her role at the tribal council was expanded to include coordinating the construction project, working with researchers, and managing the various permits and approvals required for such an unusual building. She found herself learning about federal archaeology regulations, university partnership agreements, and traditional building techniques all at the same time. The first major challenge came when the State Historical Preservation Office initially balked at approving construction on an archaeological site. However, Dr. Frost and Dr. White Eagle were able to demonstrate that the project would actually enhance rather than damage the site's historical value. The original chamber would be preserved and protected, while the new construction would complete the architectural vision that had been interrupted by historical circumstances. The approval came through, but with strict conditions for archaeological monitoring throughout the construction process. Assembling the right construction team required months of networking and negotiation. James River Hawk served as the general contractor, but he needed specialists in traditional building techniques who could work alongside modern craftspeople. A master stoneworker from the Cherokee Nation agreed to consult on the foundation and wall construction. A timber framer from the Pacific Northwest who specialized in traditional joinery techniques signed on to handle the wooden structural elements. Each specialist brought deep knowledge of ancient methods combined with understanding of modern safety requirements. The university partnerships proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. 3 different institutions wanted to be involved, each with their own research, priorities, and student programs. Dr. White Eagle found herself mediating between competing academic interests while ensuring that the project remained focused on Ayana's original vision and the tribe's cultural priorities. Eventually, a consortium agreement was reached that allowed multiple universities to participate while maintaining clear tribal oversight of all activities. As winter approached, detailed planning and preparation intensified. The bone tablet instructions had to be interpreted and translated into modern architectural drawings that could be used by contractors and approved by building inspectors. This process required extensive consultation with tribal elders who understood traditional symbols and construction concepts. Some aspects of the ancient plans were immediately clear, while others required educated guesswork based on similar structures found at other archaeological sites. The most challenging aspect of the planning process was determining how to integrate modern necessities like electricity, plumbing, and heating systems into a structure designed centuries before such technology existed. The solution required innovative approaches that concealed modern infrastructure while maintaining the authentic appearance and function of traditional architecture. Solar panels were designed to look like traditional roofing materials, Radiant floor heating was hidden beneath stone floors laid according to ancient patterns. Ayana spent most of her free time that winter studying the artifacts from the chamber, looking for additional clues about her ancestors' intentions. The pottery vessels had yielded seeds from heritage varieties of corn, beans, and squash that were different from modern cultivated versions. Botanical experts confirmed that these were indeed ancient varieties that could potentially be grown again, adding agricultural restoration to the project's cultural preservation goals. The tools found in the chamber provided valuable insights into construction techniques that would be used in the building project. Stone cutting tools showed evidence of specific techniques that master craftspeople could replicate. Wooden implements revealed methods for shaping and joining timber that were more sophisticated than many modern observers had realized. Each artifact contributed to the growing understanding of how the building should be constructed. As spring approached and construction was scheduled to begin, Ayana reflected on how much her life had changed since she first decided to build a house by the bridge. What had started as a personal dream had become a community project, involving dozens of people and multiple institutions. The simple house she had originally envisioned had evolved into something much more ambitious and meaningful. She was about to embark on a project that would take years to complete and would challenge her in ways she had never imagined. The night before groundbreaking was scheduled to resume, Ayana walked to the bridge one more time. The excavation site was now covered with a protective shelter, and materials for construction were neatly stacked nearby. Tomorrow, she would begin building not just a house but a bridge between past and future, a demonstration that ancient wisdom could still guide modern lives. The secret her ancestors had buried beneath the stone was not just about preserving the past, but about inspiring the future. The second groundbreaking ceremony was far different from the original construction start. Representatives from 3 universities were present, along with traditional craftspeople from 5 different tribes, reporters from Native American publications, and a documentary film crew that was recording the entire project. Ayana felt overwhelmed by the attention, but also proud that her ancestors' vision was attracting such respect and interest from the academic and indigenous communities. Construction began with the most challenging aspect of the project, creating a foundation that would protect the original chamber while supporting the building above it. Modern engineering techniques were used to create a suspended foundation system that would distribute the building's weight around rather than over the archaeological site. The solution was elegant but complex, requiring precise calculations and innovative construction methods that impressed even the most experienced contractors. The first month of construction proceeded slowly but smoothly. The foundation work required constant archaeological supervision to ensure that no additional artifacts were disturbed. Several small finds were made during the excavation for the foundation supports, pottery shards and stone tools that provided additional insights into how the site had been used in ancient times. Each discovery required careful documentation and consultation with tribal historians before work could continue. James Riverhawk proved to be an ideal coordinator between the traditional craftspeople and modern construction workers. His respect for both ancient techniques and contemporary safety standards helped bridge the gap between different approaches to building. The traditional stoneworkers taught modern masons techniques for fitting stones without mortar that were stronger and more durable than conventional methods. In return, the modern workers shared power, tools, and lifting equipment that made the ancient techniques more practical for contemporary use. The university, students who participated in the project, brought energy and enthusiasm that impressed even the skeptical tribal council members. Graduate students in architecture documented every step of the traditional construction process, creating detailed records that could be used to teach these techniques to future generations. Anthropology students interviewed the traditional craftspeople, recording oral histories and technical knowledge that had never been written down. Engineering students analyzed the structural principles behind ancient building methods, often discovering that traditional approaches were more sophisticated than modern alternatives. As summer progressed, the building began to take recognizable shape. The stone walls rose according to the patterns described in the bone tablets, with each course fitted precisely without mortar in the traditional manner. The master stoneworker from the Cherokee Nation proved to be a patient teacher, showing both students and professional masons how to read the natural patterns in stone and fit irregular pieces into perfectly stable walls. The work was slow but meditative, requiring careful attention and respect for the materials that Ayanna found deeply satisfying. The timber framing presented different challenges. The bone tablets described joining techniques that required hand-cut joints and wooden pins instead of metal fasteners. The traditional joinery was stronger and more flexible than modern construction methods, but it required skills that few people still possessed. The master timber framer spent weeks teaching traditional techniques to a crew that included both professional carpenters and eager university students. The sound of wooden mallets and handsaws replaced power tools for much of the timber work, creating a rhythm of construction that felt more connected to natural processes. Integrating modern systems into traditional construction required constant creativity and problem-solving. The electrical system was designed to follow traditional patterns, with wiring concealed within wooden channels that followed decorative elements in the timber framing. The plumbing system used modern materials but followed routes that would have been natural for ancient builders carrying water from the nearby stream. The heating system used radiant floor technology that provided even warmth similar to what traditional fire heating would have achieved, but with modern efficiency and safety. The most exciting discovery of the summer came when workers uncovered additional carved stones that appeared to be decorative elements for the building's exterior. These stones had been carefully buried near the original chamber, apparently intended for installation once the main structure was complete. The carvings depicted seasonal cycles, water patterns, and animal figures that were both beautiful and culturally significant. Incorporating these original decorative elements into the new building created a direct physical connection between past and present that moved many observers to tears. Ayanna found herself changing as the construction progressed, working closely with traditional craftspeople and participating in the hands-on building process taught her skills and perspectives she had never expected to learn. She became proficient at reading stone patterns, understanding timber grain, and recognizing the subtle signs that indicated when traditional techniques were being performed correctly. The project was building not just a house, but also building her into someone more deeply connected to her cultural heritage. The media attention surrounding the project brought both opportunities and challenges. Positive coverage in architecture magazines and academic journals attracted additional funding and support from preservation organizations. However, some coverage focused more on the novelty of the project than on its cultural significance, requiring careful management to ensure that the story was told with appropriate respect and accuracy. Ayanna learned to give interviews that educated the public about Indigenous architecture while maintaining privacy about sacred aspects of the construction process. By autumn, the building was substantially complete structurally, though interior work and finishing details would continue through the winter. The completed structure was breathtaking in its integration of ancient wisdom with modern functionality. The building seemed to grow naturally from the landscape, its stone walls echoing the colors and textures of local geology, while its timber elements reflected the surrounding forest. The design principles described in the bone tablets had created a structure that was both timelessly beautiful and perfectly suited to its environment. The most profound moment of the construction process came when Ayanna spent her first night in the nearly completed building. She had moved a sleeping bag into what would become the main living area, wanting to experience the space as her ancestors had intended it to be used. As she lay looking up at the timber ceiling that had been assembled using centuries-old techniques, she felt a deep sense of connection not just to the building, but to the long line of her ancestors who had dreamed of creating something beautiful and lasting in this place. The building's connection to the water and the bridge created acoustic properties that enhanced the experience of living there. The sound of the flowing stream was audible throughout the structure, providing a constant, gentle background that was both soothing and energizing. The positioning of windows and doors according to traditional principles meant that natural light moved through the space in patterns that reflected seasonal changes, creating a living calendar that connected daily life to natural cycles. As winter approached and the intensive construction phase wound down, Ayanna began planning the interior furnishing and the formal dedication ceremony. The building was nearly ready for occupancy, but she wanted to ensure that it was completed in a manner that honored both the ancient plans and the community effort that had made the project possible. The dedication would need to recognize the contributions of traditional craftspeople, university partners, tribal leaders, and the ancestors whose vision had made it all possible. The project had taken on a life of its own, becoming something much larger than Ayana's original dream of building a simple house. What had started as a personal construction project had evolved into a demonstration of how traditional knowledge could address contemporary challenges. Architects and builders from around the world were requesting information about the techniques being used. Environmental organizations were studying the building's sustainable features, which achieved remarkable energy efficiency using methods developed centuries before modern green building concepts existed. The most unexpected outcome was the revival of traditional building skills within the tribal community. Several young people who had participated in the construction as students or apprentices expressed interest in learning more about these techniques. Elder craftspeople who had thought their knowledge would die with them found themselves teaching eager students who wanted to preserve and continue traditional building arts. The project was creating not just a single building, but a renewal of cultural knowledge that could influence future construction projects throughout the region. As Ayana prepared to move into her new home, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The simple desire to build a house near the bridge had uncovered ancient secrets, brought together diverse communities, and created something that honored both past wisdom and future possibilities. The building stood as proof that traditional knowledge was not obsolete, but could provide innovative solutions to contemporary challenges. Her ancestors' carefully preserved plans had been waiting for the right moment and the right person to bring them to life, and Ayana felt honored to have been chosen for this responsibility. The dedication ceremony was planned for the winter solstice, following traditional practices for blessing new structures at times of cosmic significance. Ayana worked with tribal spiritual leaders to design a celebration that would honor both the ancestors who had created the original plans and the contemporary community that had brought them to life. Invitations went out to everyone who had contributed to the project, from university professors to traditional craftspeople to tribal council members. As the solstice approached, unexpected visitors began arriving at the reservation. Tribal representatives from across North America had heard about the project and wanted to see the completed building for themselves. Architects and engineers came to study the integration of traditional and modern techniques. Reporters from international publications arrived to document what was being called a breakthrough in sustainable architecture and cultural preservation. The building itself was ready for its formal unveiling. Interior work had been completed using the same principles of traditional craftsmanship as the exterior construction. Furniture had been created by traditional woodworkers using designs adapted from historical examples found in museums and described in oral histories. Modern appliances were seamlessly integrated into traditional kitchen designs. The lighting system used LED technology arranged in patterns that mimicked traditional fire lighting, providing efficient illumination that felt natural and warm. The most remarkable interior feature was the ceremonial room that had been specifically described in the bone tablet plans. This circular space at the center of the building was designed for community gatherings, with acoustic properties that enhanced speaking and singing voices. The room's proportions and materials created natural sound amplification that made whispered words audible throughout the space while containing louder sounds within the room. Modern acoustic engineers were amazed by the sophisticated understanding of sound dynamics demonstrated in the ancient design. On the morning of the solstice, Ayana stood in her new kitchen preparing traditional foods for the dedication feast. The kitchen's design combined ancient principles with modern convenience in ways that made cooking both efficient and spiritually meaningful. The wood-burning stove could also use solar-heated thermal mass for cooking, reducing fuel needs while maintaining the connection to fire that was central to traditional food preparation. Windows positioned according to seasonal sun patterns provided natural light for food preparation at optimal times of day. The dedication ceremony began at dawn with prayers offered in multiple native languages, acknowledging the diverse tribal communities that had contributed to the project's success. Joseph Firewalker led the primary ceremony, but spiritual leaders from other tribes were invited to add their own blessings and recognition. The multi-tribal nature of the ceremony reflected how the project had brought together indigenous communities that rarely had opportunities to collaborate on such significant undertakings. Dr. White Eagle presented a comprehensive report on the archaeological discoveries that had made the project possible. The original chamber was now permanently protected within a specially designed viewing area that allowed visitors to see the artifacts in their original context while ensuring their preservation. The bone tablets and other artifacts had been studied by researchers from multiple institutions, contributing to a growing understanding of pre-contact indigenous architecture and engineering. University representatives spoke about the educational value of the project, describing how student participation had enhanced academic programs in architecture, anthropology, and engineering. Graduate students had written dissertations based on their experiences learning traditional building techniques. Undergraduate students had gained hands-on experience with sustainable construction methods that would influence their future careers. The project had created a model for academic community collaboration that other institutions were already seeking to replicate. James Riverhawk addressed the gathering on behalf of the construction teams, describing how the project had taught him and his workers techniques that they would use in future projects. The traditional stone fitting methods proved to be faster and more durable than conventional masonry when workers became proficient in the techniques. The timber joinery created stronger structures with less material waste than modern framing methods. The project had not just preserved ancient knowledge, but had demonstrated its practical value for contemporary construction. The master craftspeople who had taught traditional techniques were honored with special recognition for their willingness to share knowledge that had been carefully guarded for generations. Their decision to teach these skills to a broader community had ensured that the knowledge would not be lost and would continue to evolve and improve. Several announced their intention to continue teaching traditional building arts to young people from their own tribes and others who were interested in learning. When it came time for Ayana to speak, she found herself overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had been accomplished. Standing in the main room of her new home, surrounded by hundreds of people who had contributed to making her dream a reality, she felt the weight of responsibility for stewarding both a physical building and a body of cultural knowledge. She spoke about her gratitude to the ancestors who had preserved the building plans and to the living community that had brought them to life. The feast that followed the ceremony showcased foods prepared using traditional methods in the building's new kitchen. Heritage varieties of corn, beans, and squash that had been grown from seeds found in the original chamber were served alongside modern dishes that demonstrated the continuity between past and present foodways. The combination of traditional cooking methods with modern food safety practices created meals that were both culturally authentic and contemporary in their appeal. As evening fell, the building's lighting system was demonstrated for the gathered visitors. The LED lights arranged in traditional patterns created an atmosphere that was both ancient and modern, providing practical illumination while maintaining the spiritual ambiance that was central to the building's design. The integration of technology with traditional aesthetics impressed visitors who had expected to see a compromise between functionality and cultural authenticity. The most moving moment of the dedication came when Ayana's grandmother was invited to be the first person other than Ayana to sleep in the completed building. The elderly woman had been present at every stage of the project, offering guidance and blessing each phase of construction. Her approval of the finished building carried special significance for the tribal community, confirming that the project had successfully honored traditional values while embracing contemporary innovation. Late that night, as the last visitors departed and the celebration wound down, Ayana found herself alone in her new home for the first time since its completion. Walking through rooms that combined centuries-old design principles with 21st-century functionality, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment and responsibility. The building was not just her home, but a living monument to the wisdom of her ancestors and the collaborative spirit of her contemporary community. Standing by the window that looked out toward the bridge where her journey had begun, Ayana reflected on how much her life had changed since she first decided to build a house by the water. The secret buried beneath the stone had transformed her personal dream into a community achievement that would influence indigenous architecture and cultural preservation for generations to come. The house was complete, but the story it told about the enduring value of traditional knowledge was just beginning to unfold. 6 months after the dedication ceremony, Ayana's home had become an unexpected destination for visitors from around the world. Architects studying sustainable design made pilgrimages to see how ancient techniques could be integrated with modern technology. Indigenous communities sent delegations to learn about the cultural preservation aspects of the project. Environmental engineers came to study the building's remarkable energy efficiency, which exceeded modern green building standards using methods developed centuries before climate change became a global concern. The most significant long-term impact of the project was the establishment of the Traditional Building Arts Institute, headquartered in a new education center built adjacent to Ayana's home, using the same construction principles. The institute brought together master craftspeople from multiple tribes to teach traditional building techniques to new generations of students. Young people who might otherwise have left the reservation for education and career opportunities found themselves drawn to learn skills that connected them to their heritage while preparing them for careers in sustainable architecture and construction. Dr. White Eagle had been appointed as the institute's first director, combining her historical expertise with the practical knowledge gained during the construction project. Under her leadership, the institute developed curriculum that taught traditional techniques alongside modern safety standards and building codes. Students learned to read stone patterns and understand timber grain, while also studying structural engineering and project management. The program created a new category of professionals who could serve as bridges between ancient wisdom and contemporary construction needs. The heritage seeds discovered in the original chamber had grown into a thriving agricultural restoration program. Ayana maintained gardens around her home where ancient varieties of corn, beans, squash, and medicinal plants grew using traditional farming methods. The harvest from these gardens provided food for institute students and community gatherings, while also supplying seeds for other tribal communities interested in reviving heritage agriculture. The connection between traditional building and traditional farming created a comprehensive approach to cultural preservation and environmental sustainability. James Riverhawk had established his own construction company specializing in traditional building techniques, employing graduates from the Institute's programs. His crews were in constant demand for projects throughout the region, as property owners discovered that traditional stone and timber construction was not only beautiful, but also more durable and energy efficient than conventional building methods. The economic success of traditional building techniques provided a sustainable foundation for continuing these practices into the future. The archaeological discoveries had continued to yield insights about indigenous life before European contact. Additional excavations around the original site, conducted with full tribal oversight and participation, had revealed evidence of a much larger community than historians had previously understood. The building that Ayana had constructed appeared to have been intended as a central gathering place for a substantial settlement that had been disrupted by historical events. Completing the building had symbolically completed a vision that had been interrupted but never abandoned. University partnerships had evolved into a permanent research consortium that studied traditional knowledge systems from multiple perspectives. Anthropologists documented oral histories and traditional practices. Engineers analyzed the structural principles behind ancient construction techniques. Environmental scientists studied traditional ecological knowledge and its applications to contemporary sustainability challenges. The interdisciplinary approach had created new academic fields that bridged indigenous studies with practical applications in architecture, engineering, and environmental management. The building itself had proven to be even more remarkable than anyone had anticipated. Its integration with natural systems created a structure that seemed to be alive, responding to seasonal changes and weather patterns in ways that enhanced rather than fought natural processes. In summer, the building stayed cool through passive ventilation systems described in the bone tablets. In winter, thermal mass and solar gain provided warmth with minimal additional heating. During spring floods, drainage systems channeled water away from the structure while directing it to irrigate the surrounding gardens. International recognition had brought both opportunities and challenges. The United Nations had invited Ayana to speak at conferences on indigenous rights and environmental sustainability. Architectural organizations had presented awards recognizing the project's innovation in combining traditional and modern techniques. However, the attention also brought pressures to commercialize or replicate the project in ways that might compromise its cultural integrity. Ayana found herself in the role of protecting the project's values while sharing its benefits with the broader world. The most unexpected development was the emergence of similar projects in other indigenous communities around the world. Tribal communities in Australia, New Zealand, and South America had reached out to learn about the techniques and principles developed during Ayana's project. Traditional building knowledge that had been nearly lost was being revived and adapted for contemporary use. The project had sparked a global movement to preserve and apply indigenous architectural wisdom to address modern challenges in sustainability and cultural preservation. As Ayana prepared to celebrate the second anniversary of moving into her home, she reflected on the journey that had transformed her simple dream into a catalyst for cultural renewal. The secret her ancestors had buried beneath the bridge had been more than just building plans. It had been a complete vision for living in harmony with natural systems while maintaining strong community connections. The building they had envisioned, and she had completed, served as both a home and a demonstration that traditional knowledge could provide solutions to contemporary challenges. The bridge that had inspired her original choice of building site had taken on new symbolic meaning. It now represented not just a connection between the two sides of the river, but a bridge between past and future, between traditional wisdom and modern innovation, between indigenous communities and the broader world. Visitors often commented that standing on the bridge and looking at Ayana's home, they could see both where humanity had been and where it might be going. On quiet evenings, Ayana would sit in the ceremonial room at the center of her home, listening to the sound of water flowing beneath the bridge and feeling the presence of all the people who had contributed to making the ancient vision a modern reality. The carved stones that decorated the walls seemed to pulse with life in the firelight, telling stories of persistence, wisdom, and hope that connected past generations with future possibilities. The house by the waterside had become more than Ayana had ever dreamed possible. It was a home that honored the past while embracing the future, a teaching center that preserved ancient knowledge while fostering innovation, and a symbol of what could be accomplished when communities work together to bridge differences and build something beautiful and lasting. The secret buried beneath the bridge had been revealed, but its influence would continue to surprise and inspire people for generations to come. As she prepared for sleep in the home her ancestors had dreamed and she had built, Ayana felt grateful for the chain of events that had led her to this place. The land had indeed chosen its caretaker, and she had proven worthy of the trust placed in her by both the ancestors who had preserved their vision and the contemporary community that had helped bring it to life. The building stood as proof that some dreams are too important to remain buried forever, waiting instead for the right moment and the right person to bring them into the light.